He was her high school sweetheart.
I think I kissed him first. That's what he liked about me.
But he wasn't ready to settle down, so she married another man. Big mistake.
I knew I was with the wrong guy before I even got married.
Years later, she found her first love again.
I was very lucky to have him.
Until one very unlucky Friday the 13th.
It was an execution-style murder.
She lost him, this time forever.
And I'm like, no, he can't be dead.
Suspicion pointed at her estranged husband, but his alibi and his reputation were rock solid.
From his co-workers, he was an intense family man. He loved his children.
Still, he was accused of orchestrating a murder for hire, with surprising evidence from his own mother.
What's inside the envelope?
$4,000.
But he insisted he didn't murder anyone, that he could be a victim himself.
He told me the same thing had ended up happening to me.
Who would the jury believe about the Friday the 13th mystery?
Good evening and welcome to Dateline. I'm Ann Curry. The young woman in tonight's story felt lucky to have a second chance. After a failed marriage, she was back together with a man she had loved since high school. Until one morning when a single shot rang out in a parking garage, and it would take a very different kind of luck for investigators to piece together the truth. Here's Josh Mankiewicz.
Your first love can be your last, or it can be just a distant memory. Either way, it's unforgettable, even if it takes you back to the high school prom.
How do you look in that tux?
Thought he was adorable then. I think that was the first night that I really told him that I was in love with him.
How do you take that?
He loved me too.
It had been almost 20 years since Stacy Rock and Ed Schiller got lost in each other's eyes on prom night.
Our hands were like magnets. We never just sat next to each other. We were always like melted into each other.
How about when he kissed you?
Amazing. I think I kissed him first. That's what he liked about me because he was a little shy.
But that was back in high school. Over the years, they'd broken up and gotten back together more than once, but they never married. Maybe they were too young. Maybe they loved each other too much. But then came the summer of 2005. They'd been apart for close to 10 years when Ed, now 39, and Stacy, now 36, reconnected. And it turned out the magic was still there.
We were kind of crazy about each other. We were protective of each other. We were afraid of losing each other.
It's the kind of silly fear you have when you're that crazy about someone. But then it came true. On January 13th, 2006, Stacy Rock did lose the love of her life. That unluckiest of days was, like today, a Friday the 13th. This one, a cold January morning outside Boston. Ed Schiller was getting ready to leave his car and enter the office building where he worked. But first, Ed made a call to Stacy.
Ed called me, as he always did, and we chatted a little bit, and I said, I'll talk to you later. And I should have known, because he'd always call back.
Instead, someone walked up to Ed and fired a single bullet into his head.
Can you get someone down here immediately right now?
We're getting him out right now.
He's been shot. I don't know. He's in the car in his garage.
Ed's co-worker had discovered him in his car in the two-story parking garage next to Aronson Insurance, where Ed worked as an agent, 7:45 in the morning. Ed Schiller regularly arrived at work early, and he'd sit in his car for about 15 minutes here in the parking garage and listen to music before he went inside. In short, he was a creature of habit, and those habits made it easier to stalk and kill him. Police Sergeant Duke Donahue investigates homicides for the Middlesex County DA's office.
It seemed to be that it was an execution-style murder.
But who would want to execute Ed Schiller? The photo album of Ed's life shows a man who acted as if he didn't have a care in the world. Ed didn't just embrace life, he leapt at it, whether it was on the slopes or during a quiet moment holding his brother's baby.
Oh, hi, movie camera.
Ed Schiller seemed to be a guy with a million friends and no enemies.
Ed loved life. He loved to, it sounds like a cliche, but Ed loved to live.
Carl Schiller, Ed's younger brother.
Part of the real sadness of Ed's murder is that he was turning things around on so many different levels. And I think reconciling with Stacy was a part of that.
When police at the crime scene checked Ed's cell phone, they saw the last number he dialed was Stacy's. 2 hours later, they were at her door.
What'd you think when you saw them?
It's kind of a blur, but they told me that Ed had been shot. And I'm like, no, you know, he can't be dead. I wish they had killed me instead.
In that dark, dingy parking garage, detectives could find no eyewitnesses, no obvious motives, no fingerprints, no DNA, and no gun. There was one bullet casing outside the car. Eventually, police dug out a 9mm slug that passed through Ed and lodged in the car door. Now, investigators dug through Ed's past.
Ed Schiller wasn't a guy with enemies.
Not that we discovered, no.
So investigators looked closer to home at both Ed and Stacy's family circles. Stacy was just getting out of an unhappy marriage and had 3 kids. Her divorce from her husband of 10 years, Jim Brescia, was almost finalized when she and Ed got together again. Detectives asked Stacy if Jim Brescia could have had anything to do with Ed's murder.
I couldn't let myself think that Jim had anything to do with it.
When Stacy finally talked to Jim Brescia later that day, he said something that sent a chill up her spine.
I think I asked him if he had killed my love or Ed. All I remember him saying is, "When am I supposed to cry?"
But police checked Jim Brescia's alibi, and it was rock solid. He was at work, far from the murder scene, and all of that sent police back to square one. Who killed Stacy's love? Who killed a likable and fun-loving guy? Someone who didn't seem to have any enemies. Or did he? Detectives do some questioning and alarm bells go off.
I told him there had been a shooting.
Did he say, and who got shot?
He did not. He said I had nothing to do with it.
When the Friday the 13th mystery continues.